need my... Can you all hear me? You can all hear me, okay. The assembled multitude. I think I'll just take this off for now and maybe put it on later. So I'll walk into the camera now and say hello everyone and welcome. I'm Nicholas Vajani, the Dean of the College of Architecture, Arts and Humanities. Thank you for coming today. I'll just remark that this morning it was overcast and now the sun is shining. Before starting with some opening thoughts, I just wanted to say a few words about I wanted to say a few words of heartfelt thanks. First of all, to the brave panelists who are here today, putting themselves on the line for this untested experiment. I'm so grateful to you all for being here. I also want to thank three good spirits who have been rocks of support along the way. First is Dr. Andrea Michalake, who's sitting right there, assistant professor of architecture, who offered to merge her ongoing architecture series with our conversation format for her last event, which was held a week ago here at the Owen Pavilion. Andrea also set up today's webinar and has offered advice and encouragement throughout, so thank you, Andrea. Next is Shannon Robert, who's not here, but she is watching on screen, Associate Professor of Theater. Shannon supplied some of today's recording equipment, but much, much more than that, she's been a fountain of unending generosity towards me all year as I try to orient myself at this institution. So thank you so much, Shannon. And last, but definitely not least, Caitlin Salmons, a graduate student government president, sitting right there, currently PhD student in our RSIT program, and our chat moderator today. Caitlin has been essential in helping to put this panel together, in networking with student constituencies on campus, and being a source of positive energy throughout. So thank you, Caitlin. The idea for this series formed last spring as I began to prepare for taking on the dean position. I asked myself, what could I do in the area of diversity and inclusion that might be helpful, that might make a difference, and that wouldn't just repeat what others have already tried and done. Around the same time, and actually before the death of George Floyd, I began to feel increasingly dismayed, not only at the divide and the tensions we see in this country, but at the absence of any dialogue that might resolve them. We seem to have lost the art of constructive talking and listening. People with different points of view no longer sit together and communicate with respect and without judgment. Admittedly, Clemson is only one very small corner of this country, but as one panelist said last week, Clemson is also a microcosm of this country. My hope for the Clemson Conversations initiative is that we can find our way to listening, hearing, understanding, and yes, working toward reconciliation. In the fall, I met with several student groups in the college, all addressing issues in their own way. CNOMAS in architecture, the We See You initiative coming out of performing arts, and the Call My Name Student Advisory Board, just to name three. In December and January, I met with leaders from all these initiatives to form a college inclusion council. The idea of the Inclusion Council is that we will work together to help consolidate and amplify what is already underway in the college, and maybe come up with new initiatives as well. I hope very much that this can continue and be formalized next year. Tonight's topic is Clemson Family. It was prompted by several comments I heard last summer in response to the events happening in the wake of George Floyd's death. Many students and faculty remarked that while the concept of the Clemson family is referenced frequently, they had never felt as though they were part of that family. It struck me immediately that this would be something to talk about with the hope of doing something concrete to help. No one single conversation can solve everything. So the idea for the Clemson Conversations initiative is that it becomes an ongoing platform for open, honest, respectful, and constructive dialogue, and that these ongoing dialogues may begin to have a cumulative effect, that listening can lead to healing, that out of these conversations we can also develop an idea of what we can do that is realistic, reasonable, and achievable. In the UK, there's a national initiative called Everyone's Invited. It seeks to unearth, track, and address the culture of sexual misconduct and other forms of systemic abuse at schools. Their website provides a good definition of reconciliation, which I would like to quote for you. Quote, "Reconciliation does not mean to forgive and forget, but to forgive and go forward. Together, we are building on the mistakes of the past and working towards reconciliation and creating a new future." Close quote. One more quote, and then I promise to stop talking. This one is from Nelson Mandela, who spearheaded South Africa's unprecedented Truth and Reconciliation Initiative. I quote, "In the end, reconciliation is a spiritual process which requires more than just a legal framework. It has to happen in the hearts and minds of people." Close quote. So I invite you to join us as we explore the possibilities of this venture. Thank you. And that's the end of my introductory remarks. I just wanted to say a couple of words about how I'd like to structure the next hour and a half or so. I'm going to ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves in turn. And then I have a couple of questions to get things started, and then we'll see how things go from there. If you have a question in the audience, please just raise your hand. There's a microphone that's floating around that can be given to you if you want to ask a question. And Caitlin will be moderating the chat, and if there's a question in the chat that seems like it's the right question to ask, she'll let me know, and we'll go with the chat question. Okay? So to get things started, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself? Do you have a microphone there?
Yes. Hi, I am Sarah Adams. I'm a senior at Clemson. I'm a women's leadership major with minors in English and religious studies. I also spent a lot of time in the theater at the beginning of my freshman and sophomore years. Say that because I'm here with some friends from the theater. And I have worked with the Call My Name project, worked on research, going through census data, and also worked on organizing the Call My Name Student Advisory Board to get students together to help with the tours and with more research projects. So, and I also worked for the Gantt Center. And I'll pass it off to Tiana.
What an introduction. Hi, I'm Tiana Flynn Brown. I am a sophomore performing arts and psychology double major. I'm vice president of the Noir Arts Collective, which is a black art club here on campus with Caprice on the end here. We also have an initiative called We See You, which is a video campaign that works to shed light on social justice issues within Clemson's, the city, the town, and the campus as well, specifically. I'm also the BIPOC student representative for the IDEA Committee, which is in the Performing Arts Department. And yes, that's all.
Hello, my name is Kendra Johnson. I'm an associate professor in performing arts. I also teach African American theater classes. I've been here for 18 years. And our department, very little diversity, which we're trying to work on. We created the IDEA Committee this semester, this year, and hoping to address some of the issues that are happening in our department as well as on campus.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm from Paraguay. I'm a Fulbright scholar, and I'm in my first year of the MS program in Architecture and Health.
Hello. My name is LaToya Maddox. I am the Chief Business Officer for the College of Architecture, Arts, and Humanities. I've been with the university for 13 years, and I also serve as a commissioner on the Commission of the Black Experience here on Clemson's campus.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kenneth Sloan. I'm a senior industrial engineering major here at Clemson. I am currently the outgoing president of the Asian Student Association here on campus. I've also worked with the President's Social Justice and Equity Task Force and with other Asian American issues on campus.
Hello, everyone. My name is Capri Stora. I am a third-year junior. I'm an English major with a minor in theater. I am the president of the New Arts Collective alongside with Tiana and also one of the key founders in the WeCU movement.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's welcome our panel. So my first question is this. It takes a lot of courage to be willing to sit on a stage and participate in an event like this. So what motivated you to agree to do this, and what were you thinking? Do you want to start, Capri, since you have the mic?
I guess so. I would say in my time here at Clemson, when I first came in, I was someone who I knew it was a PWI, but I wasn't trying to focus so much on that fact. But as time went by, it became just a sort of, not burden, but something that always was bothering me. There's this quote that it's kind of been like the key, I guess, in my thinking, and I mentioned it before to people like Tiana and other people. It's a quote by Zora Neale Hurston, which I'm going to horribly paraphrase, but it's like, I feel most colored when I'm thrown against a white canvas, which is something that I feel Clemson has done to me, and I feel like a lot of other students of color is made them so aware of their identity in a way that they haven't before.
So I'm here today mostly because I feel like in kind of the landscape, and I know at Clemson, people of color are, you know, very minoritized here. And I think even within that community, I feel like Asian Americans are particularly even kind of left out in the South in general. It's very much a black or white issue when it comes to race. So I just wanted to take my time and take this opportunity to talk to my community's issues and represent them.
I agreed to sit on the panel today because I believe in the Clemson family. I believe it exists. It has existed for quite some time now. Is it without issues? Absolutely not, which is why we're here. I believe you believe in it because you're here and you thought it valuable time, a use of time to join us and have this discussion. There are a lot of sensitive issues that is happening not only on campus but in our world today that goes beyond our country. And we have seen surmountable growth over the last several hundred years of how marginalized communities are treated and the privileges that they're given. I call them privileges because sometimes that's how it's portrayed, as though it's a privilege for you to be considered and viewed equal. So there's a lot that we still need to discuss, and there's a lot of change needed, and I totally agree with the introduction that happens in discussion, and it happens through acceptance, it happens through education, and it happens when everyone is willing to step outside of their box of understanding and realize that we are equal. And what's beautiful about this world is that we're different. And it's the difference that is really what is able to progress us all. And the only way we will progress is when we allow and acknowledge and accept difference.
So, why wouldn't I be here? So, I'm a Fulbright scholar. Like, I have a scholarship, and that's the only way that it's possible to me to be here receiving this quality of education. And there are a lot of Latin American people that are not able to receive education at any level, and I'm this privileged. So I feel the responsibility to talk and to stand for those people that aren't able to receive the opportunity I have and to work for them. And the second reason is that I got here last August 2020, and this is one of my first in-person activities, so of course I want to be here.
All right, so for me, I don't run from discussions on race. I've been doing it for the past 40 years. Like, my family integrated our neighborhood. I'm always the only one in class. I'm the only black person in my whole entire department since Glenn Hare left me. And so I'm always engaging. Also, I'm here on behalf of my students. A lot of times, my black students will come to in my office, close the door, and tell me how the real Clemson is. So there's one depiction of the Clemson family, and then they're telling me their personal experiences, which are very different from what you see or what's projected. So I'm here for them as well.
I would say that I'm here on behalf of the students who fought before us on this campus, people who fought and worked with the Psych Sit-In, generations and generations before that, as the Call My Name Project has uncovered so much information about those that built this campus. I'm continuing the fight that they started, and as many people have already said, conversation can be one of the most fruitful ways of starting some form of change. And I hope that with this conversation and with this series, many people take the gems that are given and use that as fuel to their fire in order to actively make the change that they feel like needs to be seen. Because there are many demands, many things that have been asked of this university that have gone unacknowledged, and many people who deserve apologies from this university that have not received that as well. So I hope to fight for those things, and hope that the people that come after us to this university can do the same as well.
So why am I here? I'm white. When I was asked to be on this panel, I was uncomfortable with it because I generally don't want to speak for people about these issues. And I maintain that stance. However, I think that white people need to be listening a lot when we're talking about race, and plugging into movements without trying to do what people of color have already been doing for so long. And I also want to see our country and our communities heal. And I think that happens with conversation. It can happen with conversation. And I think Dean Vashoni mentioned this. There's a difference between conversation and debate. And I think conversation is how we more naturally communicate. And so I'm here mostly to listen, but also to model, I think, what white people should be doing, which is a lot of listening.
Very good. There's already so many things to talk about, but I have one more question, and then I really will kind of leave it to the rest of you to talk. So this is about family. We talk about the Clemson family. So I wanted to start by asking you to talk about what you imagine when you hear that term. As we know, family means something different in different cultures, but is usually a smaller unit of people who are connected by a close bond. That's a very messy description, but what does it mean when we describe an institution as a family? In that case, family is being used as a metaphor. So what does family mean to you? And what does it mean to talk about the Clemson family? So that's several questions in one, really.
I'll start. I think that family in general, to me personally, and the funny thing is, I just watched Lovecraft Country, if anybody else has watched that. I just finished it today. And I believe it's in the last episode, two of the characters who are siblings, there's been this debate over the course of the season about like what family truly means. And one of the characters, her name is Letty, she says something along the lines of, family doesn't mean some kind of obligation or some form of a blood bond that you have with people, which means you owe them something. Family is anyone, any sort of ecosystem that you build where people are willing to sacrifice the best of themselves for the best of you. So I think that is what a true, strong, true, meaningful family means in general. As far as the Clemson family goes, I think what it is portrayed as, and personally I feel like the Clemson family, that phrase is used as mainly advertisement. It's a way to reel people into this community. I mean, this campus is very pleasing to the eye. You know, it seems pretty calm, serene, like everybody likes the feel of the campus when they first come here. And the Clemson family, especially that we're in the South, that kind of like homey, like you're welcome here, we love you energy can easily reel most people in when they're leaving home for the first time for undergrad students, or even for graduate students, people who are traveling across the country, across the world, places they've never been. That's something that is intriguing for them. And I think that the Clemson family, in many ways, is a little bit of a facade. And I think that what needs to be evaluated is how much are we willing to sacrifice for everyone within this so-called Clemson family? How much are we willing to put the best of ourselves into the people that make up this campus so that we can all thrive and not just support those who make up the majority? So, yeah.
The people in the audience are saying, on the web, saying they can you please speak up into the microphone because they can't hear everything. Okay.
So sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Who else wants to take this question?
So for me, family, honestly, when I think of the word family, there's kind of just like one quote that comes to my mind from Lilo and Stitch. It's Ohana means family, and family means nobody gets left behind. And I think that's really kind of stuck with me ever since like a kid, like just that idea of family. I think that's what family kind of should be. You should try to, if you're part of a family, you should try to like reconcile with one another, even if you don't quite like get along. I know for me, like my siblings and I, we butt heads all the time. But at the end of the day, we have each other's backs, and I think that's kind of what that means. In terms of like the Clemson family, honestly, when I think of the Clemson family, the first image that comes to my mind is just like bright flashes of purple and orange on the football field. Like that's kind of what always seems to be advertised as a Clemson family, and as someone who doesn't particularly care too much about football, that kind of never exactly resonated with me. And so I think that's kind of left me feeling left out of the Clemson family at times. But at the same time, and this kind of, now maybe expand a bit later, I've found family here as well, like within smaller organizations. I mentioned the Asian Student Association. That's definitely one group that I found a family part of. But there are, other organizations that, I found a family in. I know, many people have found a family not particularly within the university as a whole, but within different organizations. And maybe that's what the Clemson family should be viewed as. Maybe it should be viewed as a Clemson family tree that has many, fruits, and this metaphor being the different organizations. And maybe we belong to each of those, and each of those belong to like the full Clemson family tree.
Okay, so I don't know how to explain what the Clemson family is, but I felt that from my country, since the first contact I had with the university. So as Fulbright scholars, we have to apply to 5 universities, even if we already have our chosen one. Mine was Clemson because I liked the program I chose. So I applied to the 5 universities, and 4 of them admitted me. So when I read the letters of admission, like that was the difference, because every letter was like, you're admitted, come here if you want, and if you don't want to, let us know as soon as possible because we have a long wait list. And the Clemson letter was like, we are so proud to announce that you're admitted, and we will be so glad to have you here. Please let us know. And I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is my dream. But then I started to look, to explore like the cities where these other universities were, and it was like tempting. It was like, it was a hard decision at the end, but the different the difference was like the the good treatment I received from the beginning. So that's the way I felt the Clemson family even before I came here.
So, with any family, you really don't have a choice to join it. Husband and wife, of course, but when speaking of the children, you're born into that family. And so when you relate that theory to what we are, when we classify ourselves as family, including the faculty, the staff, and the students, we have people that have come together on this campus from all across the world. And we all have very different belief systems. We have different backgrounds. We've been exposed to different things. We've experienced different things, good and bad and indifferent. But when we come together, we bring all of that and we create a melting pot, kind of like a family. And in that melting pot, you have all kinds of good and bad that happens every day. But like a physical family, when siblings start to fight, the parents come in and they smooth things over in a stable home, that is. And I feel like when I refer to parents, that is our leaders. And in many cases, and I know I'm about to say something that everybody doesn't quite agree with, and I don't, want to portray myself as having, glossed over eyes, but in many cases, I feel like our leaders attempt to do that. May not always be successful, but there is, I feel, attempts made so that the campus can continue to feel as though a family, as though they are a family. But you have to realize that our leaders are managing people that are adults, and even our students are adults. And so whereas they cannot force us to play well together, I believe Clemson tries it very best to encourage it. I don't say that to give them a pass. Can more be done? Absolutely, which is why we're here. And I commend and really appreciate Dr. Vazani coming in and wanting to do this when he could have been focused on so many other issues as our college grows and transforms into something greater than we are today. But I feel like we all hold a level of responsibility in making sure that the family does function as it should. We can't point the finger at one group or one person. We can't point the finger at white people. White people can't point the finger at black people. I think if we all make sure that we play our part and growing the family and really behaving as one, which means we are going to have differences. We are going to view things very differently. And, even when it comes to financial matters, sometimes Dr. Vazani and I view things very differently from Central Campus. But we realize that we are a part of the...
We're not going to comment on that right now.
We realize we're a part of the whole, and we do want what's best for the good of the people, the whole here. But we always have to do that with a level of respect. At the end of the day, we can voice our differences as we should, but the only way to work to a common ground is to have conversation, is to accept that sometimes we're going to see things very differently, but at the end of the day, understand and agree, we're in this together. I'm not going to pick up my toys and go in the corner and just, leave you there. I realize we are a family, and we have to figure out this thing together.
Okay, so first warning, a former colleague called me honest to a fault. So, when I think of family, several things pop into my brain. In terms of Clemson, I think of the brochure. I think glossy marketing, smart ad that brings people in. I also think of family in general. Families can be complicated, difficult. And I was like, okay, that's Clemson, yeah, clashing of ideas. Ideally, family to me is when you are loved for who you are and accepted, not necessarily blood ties, just you can create your own families. And I think students have done that here in smaller groups because they weren't embraced by the entire family, right? And I think of sometimes families fighting, which makes sense because what families do. So in a way, yes, Clemson is a family. There's dysfunction in families. And I think at times when it comes to big issues, Clemson is dysfunctional. And they don't give, it's kind of like, I don't know if you like families where it's like families brought in by different situations, whether they're stepchildren or whatever, and a need of a child or a parent is not being met, right? It causes friction amongst everyone else. And then when I think of family, I think of it that way. Now, even with the nuances and the complications and the dysfunction, family has a benefit, right? When hopefully, when things hit the fan, family will band together, hopefully, right? That's in the best case scenario, right? Your family, like I fight my sisters, but I'm gonna check you if you bother her, right? So we're all gonna run and protect. Family is also protection. Family is also making sure everyone has a voice and is respected ideally. So there's my ideal version of family, and there's what family really is. And I think Clemson, depending on the day, how I feel, sometimes I change, but usually I see Clemson as more of the realistic family as opposed to the marketing family.
I'll say something to that too. First, I want to reiterate what everyone said about the ideas of family. I agree with all of that. I think one key ingredient in family that Clemson is lacking is recognition. When we come to PWI as a person of color, you're definitely going to you're expecting to be the only one in your class, typically. And a lack of representation typically breeds isolation. But even more than that is the lack of recognition, which I feel Clemson sadly doesn't really do a good job at. I think when some parts of the Clemson family is more performative than real, I think it's the aesthetic of what looks good, the aesthetic of a family, the aesthetic of what unity is, and too often that is not the case. So I think we cannot be a family until, of course, or have any reconciliation until we recognize the melting pot, or a different term I've heard is like a mosaic, like a vase that isn't just a melting pot, but something that is everything put together in just a tight formed order and actually united. I think that is when we can actually be a family, when everyone is recognized, no matter your background, no matter your gender, sexuality, when everything is recognized, that's when we can be a true family.
Yeah, and I'll just add, everything, what everyone is saying, but the first thing that comes to mind with my family is fighting amongst my siblings. So I have two little sisters, and I'm the oldest, so I have like a I'm right complex, right? And I'm a white person, so that obviously, probably, definitely, I know has come up, talking about race, even with my professor right here, Kendra. And so I think I'll expand on this in a second, but for me, family, part of being a family is admitting when you're wrong and knowing and having the humility to know when you're wrong. And I remember Kendra reading a play in her African American theater class, and it was centered around a black man in about, was it the 1920s, who was basically ends up being falsely accused of raping a white woman, which is a common historical thing and present thing. And I didn't get that history. I did not get that history. And I came into her office fuming because we were not, I was upset that we were not giving a trigger warning because this was talking about rape and there was a white woman who might have been raped, and whether or not like how they were questioning her might have been triggering to a student. And I remember Kendra saying, "You've just missed the mark. You've just missed the mark in this reading." And I'm so glad she said that. And I've been thinking about this for a long time and have wanted to talk with you about it again. And I think that's an example that has stuck with me. And I think about that now when I'm walking around, and I wonder just like, what am I missing? What am I missing? There are things that I'm missing. I didn't get that history. I still don't ever, and I'll never get it because I'm white. but I understand at least where people are coming from about it. And I think that's a big part about family too. And I think for Clemson, I see it more of dysfunction as you see it. And I hope for healing. And I think that, like Latoya has said, leaders coming together and talking can lead to healing. But yeah, that would be what I have to add.
I just wanted to pick up off of the point of, and I think multiple people have said it. I think it just banged me in the head when you said it. Of like, there are these mini families amongst this so-called big family, and I think Caprice maybe said that it, because they're not fully embraced once they get in here, these little mini sectors of family form. And then for those who are trying to find where they fit in, it's hard to find it because it's so widespread. Even if you go on, like, if you think about student organizations, you go on Tiger Quest, there's like 500 clubs on there. Like, nobody's gonna scroll through there to try and find somewhere that they feel like they fit in. And even if they do and it doesn't work, it's like, I did all this work for what? And I think that's where, as was mentioned, leaders, coming in to make sure that, every part of this family is being recognized and acknowledged. I think when it comes to that, there needs to be a larger effort and a more active and consistent effort to lift those people up who feel like when they come in here, they have nowhere to go. I think that's something that could really reconciliation. That's something that could really lead to that and would lead to change and help cultivate an environment where, once again, that mosaic has the chance to thrive and be seen and be valued, which is one of our values. Isn't value in there? Respect. Which includes valuing, yes.
Can I ask a question? It's something that Tiana said. You said at the Harlem Renaissance thing that you gave a presentation, and you said something that's very similar to what Caprice said a few minutes ago, which is something like, if I'll probably misquote you, but it was something like, it's really difficult when you find yourself put up against a white background all the time. Which was, do you remember saying something like that?
That's the Zora Neale.
And that's something. So, I guess my question was, I think I understand what you mean by that, but can you explore that a little bit further and kind of explain what that means?
Yeah, at least from the way that I interpret it, and conversations that we've had as well, it's like you become hyper aware of your identities when you're in a space where those identities aren't supported, uplifted, acknowledged, things like that. So you go into a classroom, you're one of none, oftentimes, or you're one of two, possibly three, and what happens when your professor says something that is extremely offensive, insensitive, then everybody starts looking at you or the one or two, and y'all looking at each other like, what are we supposed to do? And it's like, I think that's where the conversation of microaggression comes in, of like, there's this constant wear and tear of the mental bandwidth of people of color, marginalized groups, etc., that over time it's just like, what am I supposed to do here? Where am I supposed to put myself on this blank white wall when there's nothing else there to be there for me or like support me? Because you don't, well, most people, I would say, you don't get a blank canvas and just put a pink dot in the middle and it's like art. I mean, you can if that's what calls you, but generally,
I think those paintings are worth about $5 million now.
Well, let me make one. I'll sell it here.
Okay. I guess something that speaks to me within that is like when I first came to campus, I wasn't involved in the different minority communities. I was usually at Brooks, and that sort of isolated me in its own kind of way. But that is what it is. But what was sort of disappointing is looking around campus, and there's so many reminders that I am an outlier, that I am someone that, 100 years ago would not be welcome on this campus. And I think seeing reminders of that, like Tillman or Old Main, whichever preferred name you have for it, even recently, the Calhoun Honors College being named just the Clemson Honors College. I think when you constantly see reminders that this campus wasn't meant for you, and then you don't see a constant active welcoming from administration, from professors, from different organizations on campus, then that makes the feeling of isolation even more just prevalent. And that's when the white background, to me, becomes even more whiter, is when the environment outside of classes isn't welcoming to you. And that can go for anything to social life, going to different parties and hearing hearing just a bunch of people who are not persons of color, specifically black, screaming the N-word, different things like that. So it's like when campus is not creating a culture, I say, of unity, of the actual family, then that's when those feelings of isolation just get multiplied.
For me, when it's amplified, is I can go 6 months without seeing another black professor. 6 months. And it takes a toll after like 10, 15 years. And I remember I was talking to another black faculty member. He was new, he was excited. And I was like, oh, I'm isolated. I feel pure isolation. And then, so one day he surprised me with 4 other black people. And I almost cried. I was like, because I haven't seen that. And another incident was I'm a costume designer, so I will freelance. That's my research. So I will go like to Cincinnati to do fences at a professional theater. And I was having dinner with the cast and the director, and I said, this is the first time that I've sat down with all black people who weren't family in 20 years. That's crazy. So for me, I see it all the time. It's amplified all the time. And then it takes a toll. It's really exhausting. Because you have to explain yourself or whatever. Or I wear the mask that I talk about. So it's like code switching. So what I do, and I tell my students, I say, I wear a mask. You don't see the true black Kendra on this campus. And I said, you never will, because I was taught always to put that mask on. You're twice as good, you work twice as hard. I'm the first one in, I'm the last one out. And so that takes a toll. So not wearing the mask would be awesome. But I've been doing it for so long, I don't know how not to do it.
I was about to say something totally different until you said that, because I can relate.
Yes.
It's hard to sit on a panel and talk about such a sensitive topic without, getting personal. Mm-hmm. So excuse me for a second while I do. But, when Kendra talks about the mask, so I was hired with the University Budget Office 13 years ago, and it was going on 4 years ago that I was hired to come over and work for the college. And when my boss at that time, in her own kind way, suggested that I apply by slipping me a book about being a business officer. Although she knew I wanted to, but I felt so incapable. It was a desire, yes, but I saw no other black leaders in finance on campus. And so, for a second there, I thought, although this is aspirational, it's unrealistic. I literally had to convince myself that I was capable. Am I capable?
Yeah. I'll think about it. Yeah.
Thank you. I should not have had to do that. I literally had to, as the young people say, psych myself into believing, although I had a degree and had done a version of what I do now at a university level, but not in a leadership position. I should not have had to do that. And I did it because I felt that was the only way I would be able to step over. And so when I came into the position, I wore the mask for a long time. And hopefully you all never saw that. I'm looking at my colleagues in the back there. Hopefully it wasn't that visible, but I felt like I'd possibly made a mistake. Can I really do this? And so before going into those leadership meetings, and while in those, I felt so intimidated because I look around the room, and this was when there was one other black faculty member in associate dean position at that time, was at the table, and just When he would come in the room, I would feel a feeling of relief because I was no longer the only one. And I shouldn't have to. I'm glad I did, and that's what's necessary for the university to progress. But I shouldn't have to. And so I say all that to, now I'll say what I wanted to say before I heard the word mask. The university has an amazing group of intellectual people, extreme talent. When it comes to writing a document, a strategic plan, superb. It sounds like we are going to change the world. And we have several of them. Each college has one. What we have to do, I feel, if we really are wanting to change the world, is to implement and then require action. I think this is what we've been missing for a long time. We can write it, and it can sound as though we have arrived. But until there's, and we hear this word a lot, and I heard it today at our forum, until there is accountability and reaching those benchmarks, it's simply a bunch of words that sound really good. And I don't want to sound like I'm not in support. I am in support of everything that is being worked upon. But we have to implement and enforce a lot of the great ideas that we're documenting if we really want to see change on Clemson's campus.
Yeah, do you want to question? Yeah. Jim, do you want to? I think, yeah, Caitlin has a mic.
I'm not sure if this will impede it. Well, first of all, thank you. You guys are amazing. A couple of things that I've been sitting here thinking about: dialogue and family. And being a middle-aged white guy from the South and leaving the South for so long and just returning this year, one thing that I was reflecting on is, at least in my family, and I bet President Barker might have a similar experience, there are topics that you just did not discuss. And, you know, examples: homosexuality, and of course race. And I think there are a lot of white kids walking around this campus that have not been taught how to talk about it. And maybe the ones who have only been taught to talk about it in a negative way. And I think a watershed moment for me was this past Thursday when there was an event that was quite literally a denial, an active denial or recognition of the problem. And Latoya, to your comment about a commitment to action, you know, I've been working with President Barker, and one of the things that's so clear to me is there is not a space on campus, physical space on campus, where these types of dialogues can happen. I was fortunate enough to visit the Arcus Center for Social Justice at Kalamazoo College a couple of years ago, and that's the sole purpose of that building. Of course, yes, it's a space for students of color and the LGBTQ community, and even students with disabilities, to go and have a place to speak their truth to the people there. But more importantly, it's for people like me who have that privilege that we can take our syllabus, we can take our strategic plans, we can take our assignments and have that center review it and give us advice. And as an architect, many of my assignments are basically come straight out of colonialism and lots of other things, because that's how I was taught. And so they're there to help us kind of understand how we can still achieve our courses, but do it in a way that's much more effective. If there's any campus that I've ever seen that needs a place like this more than Clemson, I can't imagine where it would be. And given that we have the issues with the cemetery, given the event that I witnessed on the news, people cheering some of the hate that was being spewed, and when they pan the crowd, it looks like they're a basketball game. Like, it tells me we need something like that. And so I was taught not to talk about this stuff. So I've had to learn, especially since the 27th of May, how to talk about it. And fortunately, I have my students who are experts at it, and they've taught me. But that's my thoughts.
Something that you said kind of like keyed up one in my head, which is things that are typically taboo, typically something that is not welcome in the conversation. And I mean, we're here, Clemson's Conversations on Race and Reconciliation. But what does reconciliation mean? I think it means actually going deep into the country's history. Because if you look at the country's history, it's not perfect. It's very similar to Clemson. It's not something that is all sunshine and butterflies and flowers and all that good stuff. It's something that I think is ugly, and it's pretty. It's everything, but we cannot be a true family as a college or as a country until we look deep into our history. And I think what that means is looking at the different things that have caused division, and that is, the institution of slavery. That is the countless actions of persons of color and marginalized communities being oppressed. And I think that for campus specifically, things like having a center like that. I mean, we talk about the Gantt Center a lot, and how I literally didn't know where the Gantt Center was until my third year here, which I think is very problematic. And I believe Tiana and I, we were on one of the president's social task force for
It was the task force for facilities.
facilities,
Yes.
which was one thing I said, which apparently, I forget who the leader was for the group, but I said having signage for the Gantt Center right outside of Brackett would be enough for people to even know where that's at. And I think until goes back to my point earlier, recognition. Until the college as a whole recognizes the cemetery full of convict laborers, until we recognize the different things that are dividing us, we will never be able to be a true family. And I think, again, it's recognition. It's recognizing that a lot of the founders of this campus, they were not good people. And recognizing that, yes, they did a great thing by helping us found this campus, but it can't be all pretty. And I think, again, Clemson is so obsessed with this brand. And to another point, which was similar to in a group chat, Tiana, I'm not sure if you remember, but they were saying that if you want to change Clemson, you have to attack its brand, and this brand of perfectness. And until we attack that brand, we will not be a family.
Yes, I was gonna say, kind of to that point of, and you talked about this as well. Why is there no center, no building on campus where marginalized students, marginalized faculty, people that want and need to learn can go to for this information and those resources? We shouldn't have to spend hours upon hours, days upon days, going through files to find information that should be brought to us from the jump. And it is insane to me that we had to ask for signage for the Gantt. I shouldn't have to have a class in that building to find out where it is. Simple as that, point blank, period. I shouldn't have to talk to other students to find out these certain organizations and resources that should be at the forefront so that I know as soon as I get here where I can go for the support I need when I need it. And I think with that, I know. With that task force that we were on, which we got reeled into last minute, but I will not go into that right now. With that task force, one of the many demands was making a more well-rounded student union. Because I feel like that's what a student union should be. Our student union is a bowling alley. What is that doing to unify and connect students, build relationships amongst faculty, allow students to have some place to go where, once again, the resources that they need are easily and readily available when they need them. I'm not sure where the university is in that process of addressing those demands, because there were many task force involved with the inclusion and equity. I don't know what the term was for it, but there were many involved with many different demands that I think need to be publicly addressed, or at least addressed to all of campus, rather than, okay, we hear ya, crickets. So yeah, I think, like you mentioned and you talked about just now, I feel like that is a big step of many that need to be taken in order to really work on what this Clemson family looks like more generations come in, and as time evolves, we can't not evolve with time. And I think those are some things that are holding us back, truly. But
So let me just ask very practically, what would you have wanted to have available to you, or how would it ideally have been communicated to you when you came here first? Would an orientation session or your advisor telling you what would have worked for you?
um, I don't, orientation feels like 3,000 years ago. So I'm not sure if maybe my brain just dismissed this, but maybe y'all remember. Anybody that was able to go to orientation. Well, we'll see. I don't remember a whole lot of information about Gantt being given to us. I also don't remember, like, I was in Connections, which is a living learning program for first year and minority students coming in. And I was talking to Caprice about this because, as he said earlier, like, he didn't even know about that until after the fact. I don't know how I stumbled upon it. Honestly, I think I can't even tell you because nobody told me it existed. I think I just happened to randomly be scrolling through the website and I was like, oh, this exists. And so I applied, and thankfully I got in and I was able to build connections with people, other students who were also freshmen coming in, minoritized students. And I think that's one thing that helped me a lot personally with building relationships with people that I feel like could be my family, and I truly to this day feel like are. But yeah, I guess orientation would be a good place, making it very clear and not just a throwaway statement of, oh, we have this. Now moving on to the next. I think there were different parts of the orientation where we had to go to different centers and buildings on campus to learn about specific things. There should be some sort of an hour-long session surrounding those resources, not just for minority students, but for students who need to learn this information because they were not having those conversations, and they didn't have to have those conversations growing up. I mean, college is a place where you're supposed to evolve and learn how to cultivate relationships with people who don't look like you or exist in the same sector of the world as you. So yeah, long-winded, but I hope that answers the question.
Something else I'll speak to is that we need a course, which was mentioned, I believe, in the last panel as well, on Clemson's history. The fact that this stage we're on, this beautiful golf course behind us, this wasn't originally the campus's land. This was stolen from indigenous Native American people. It's recognitions of those kind of histories that I think would help us get to a point where we can even really converse. We're conversing right now, but that's because we all are like-minded individuals with different ideas that you spoke to earlier, that we can come together and talk about what we want to do, but it's nothing to do it, as you said, enforcing it. And things like that. Putting a course in that will teach these first-year students who may be from places like the South and not have these taboo topics talked about. But having a mandatory thing with Dr. Ronna Thomas's, her Call My Name project, like having that be mandatory to go on those walks. Because people walk by Fort Hill and don't even know there used to be a plantation house. And that in itself is a whole different conversation. But for the more resources, knowing that there's organizations like ASA out there and Latinx communities and their organizations like Latino Unidos, things like that I think need to be spread out more instead of focusing on something that Kenneth, you said in the We See video, which is the Clemson Hoorah, something along those lines, which is, football, it's, academics, engineering, it's all these different things that are really nice, but it's nothing that brings us together.
It's kind of something tying along those lines, and then kind of like what you mentioned with the a building of some sort or like a center much bigger than what Gantt currently is. And part of that, something I also mentioned as part of the WCU video that I took part in, is that we don't see a lot of these resources when we come onto campus. Maybe a slight mention during orientation or something like that. But I think once we get up here, on the stage as student leaders and stuff like that, we noticed that all of the pressure to educate and to do this work is on our shoulders. I don't think that's quite fair. I'm pretty burdened with my schoolwork to begin with. Running an organization is not particularly an easy task either. I would love it if there was some, expert, even one, or even one, kind of expert, because I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, I kind of thrust myself into this stage, and I've tried to do my best to learn, but kind of as we've talked about, this is not a conversation that I had with my family. I'm half white, half Japanese, so like, and growing up my whole life here in the South, like, these are not conversations that I'm used to having. And so, I'm a student leader, but at the same time, I'm just learning about the stuff that I'm supposed to be leading on. And, Clemson is coming to me and saying, hey, we want your input. And like, I don't know what input I have. I have no idea what's going on. So, I think having a center like that and having those resources would be, very helpful, to take the burden off of students who are, one, trying to be students, but also, learning about themselves, like just growing as people. It's hard to grow when you're being burdened by, the weight of your entire community, essentially. But yeah.
So I think that there is a wrong assumption that, speaking for as an international student, there is a wrong assumption that we all know how U.S. universities work, because all universities in the world work in the same way. And no, like, you will laugh about me, but like, all the knowledge I had about U.S. universities was everything I learned in Monsters University. And it helped me a lot. It helped me a lot because, oh, I saw that, yeah. So I remember this is the next step. But it's true, because that's all the information I had. And I already missed a lot of opportunities, like, during my first year, because there are some things that I'm supposed to know that I don't know. So that's a thing that there it should be a way to inform us about how the universities work in the U.S., because they are not. They are way different to the universities in at least South America. That is what I know. And there was other thing. Okay, someone mentioned the word evolve. We are supposed to evolve. When I started university in Paraguay, I was there 6 years, and I left my undergrad as a whole new person. And I'm coming from a very conservative country, a very conservative family, and I think South Carolina is a very conservative place too. So the only place where we would be able to debate and to talk and to learn and to build our position concerning different topics is in the university. So I think, I agree that there are people need certain places where they need to go, a safe place where I can go and say, okay, I need information about this. But on the other hand, I think that dialogue and debate and talking needs to be everywhere and on every possible platform.
I was just going to add, talking about the Gant Center, I also did not know it existed until the end of my freshman year, but the only reason that I knew at the end of my freshman year is because I met a wonderful person named Sierra Durden at an event that I went to about sex positivity, because that's what I was seeking out as a freshman. And then she invited me to have a conversation with her in her office, because I opened up to her about how I was queer and I was melting and having a terrible life crisis. And that's the only reason I found out about Gant, because she works for Gant. And so to everyone's points about there needing to be more visibility for Gant, I think it needs to have its own building. We just built a chapel. We're building a chapel on campus, right now. And so the first response is like, there's no money, there's no space. We found space and money for a chapel. I know a lot of things come from donors. We have a lot of smart people here. We can go find some donors, right? Like we can put together a team to go find a rich person who wants to donate to a whole new building. We could do that. So that's what I think. And I mean, if you're thinking like the most practical, to answer your question, way to reach students, well, students are walking in a normal year around this campus. That's what they're doing. They're walking 15 minutes between classes if you have a back-to-back. That's the most likely, the most practical way to me that you could have people know that there's a space for them. Its own building, big and proud, like this chapel building that is being built. That's all.
And yeah, Aga, do you need a microphone?
So I don't like the word or the concept of a family one bit. In fact, I think it should be retired, especially as a kind of brand concept. I'm going to turn to you and see if we can strategize and imagine that we can rebrand this university. What would be another word that could somehow appeal to the similar sentiments of coming together or belonging or caring for one another, but not be family?
I tried to find someone to pass the mic on because respectfully I disagree. I think family is the perfect word. I think we're a long ways off. Okay, I feel like we have a ways to go, but I think the mistake that we have made in the past is we unconsciously try and disconnect ourselves, and I think that's the problem. I think we should have a desire to be connected. I think that's our first path toward reaching the goal of camaraderie. So I will pass the mic on.
Not necessarily strategize, because I also don't necessarily have a new word for you, but I do think that it's a failure on the university as a whole that you don't even like the word anymore, that you think it should be retired. And I think of administration as, you said earlier, they're supposed to be sort of the parents that kind of get us together in a way. And I think, honestly, I can't trust the university to do much but disappoint me at times. And I don't mean that, like, I'm just being honest. Honest to a fault, as Kendra said before.
Speak your truth.
And I mean that in the sense that administration as a whole, not y'all, because y'all are here, but in general, the people, they know who they are. They know who they are. They will constantly make decisions that stratify us instead of bringing us together. George Floyd incident, right? I don't know why it took so long to wake up, but that was something that didn't even then. The responses were lackluster. I'm not going to say who, because I'm not allowed to call names, but I myself wrote a letter in a sense administration, which was one of the first things that ushered in the We See project. And a certain person in administration told me that it was that Clemson was better than it was when he was here in the 80s. Well, no, it did, really. Like, we know that. But it's things like that when we're not welcomed in as people of color in marginalized communities that we have to do to be a true family. And I think as far as building spaces and creating things like that, it also has to be a lot of weight on the administration to bring everyone in together. And I think that just really hasn't happened yet. I mean, it took them, I'm not even sure if they said anything about the recent cases of Asian violence at all. So it's like cases like that, that's when they're supposed to step up and be the parents and be the leaders, but they're not stepping up.
Yeah, I mean, that's like easy. How hard is that to say, you're against Asian violence? They miss the mark in such easy things, like common sense things, which is frustrating. But the whole thing about family or what would the campus be like, my daughter went to a campus out of state, I can't tell you which one, but it was so inclusive. I mean, they had transgender dorms. They had all these things. And I was like, I've been here for so long, I forgot that universities can reach out to people and include them. It was, the campus was diverse, and they had people of all political spectrums, and they had places where they were vocalizing their concerns. They were having protests, and the professors marched with the students. I was like, it was so opposite than what I feel here, right? So here, family to me means conformity, right? If you would just blend in, right, and shake your little orange pom-poms, and we're all smile, we're a family. And it's like they don't want to acknowledge our differences and celebrate the differences. Where at my daughter's undergrad school, they did, and I was like mind-blowing. So I forgot how that's like.
Where was that? I didn't
It's
catch
in
it.
North Carolina. It was in North Carolina. And I was just like, yeah.
I was just gonna say, kind of going back to the point of administration, and I was having this conversation with someone recently about playing both sides of the coin. I think as students, it's very important for us to, if it's possible, if administration makes the time for us to sit in that space, figure out what it is they are actually doing, and all the while, in the background, getting with your own people, conjuring up your own plan, so you kind of know what's happening on both ends, so then you can figure out an action plan in order to fight back against the things that are happening on our campus. But it, once again, kind of going back to Kenneth's point, we're learning as we go. There's so many things that I did not know until I got here. This is my second year here, and I'm learning so many things each day as I try to maneuver my way through this space. And it's hard to try and support all of my minority students on campus when I don't, first of all, classes, second of all, sleep. I don't have the mental capacity every single day to sit down and take the time to learn. I mean, of course I'm going to, because it means a lot to me and I think it's important, but it's not something that I can learn overnight so the next day I can jump up and be like, let's fight. Like, it just doesn't work like that. And I think that goes back to the whole missing the mark. There's so many opportunities for you to make this change. You have the power, so why don't you? And I think oftentimes when students get into these spaces with administration, they are either shot down or, well, this is the same as being shot down, but a lot of times they're told, we can't do this because of this. We don't have the money. We don't, like you said, we don't have the money. We don't have the space. Who are you going to get to make a team in order to plan and strategize this? First of all, that's not my job, that's yours. Second of all, you can do this if you care about it. And I think it was you, actually. We were having a conversation one day, I think because I asked you to help with We See You, and you said something along the lines of, we make time for the things that we care about. And that was a simple text that you sent to me, but it's something that I think about a lot because it's so true. You make time for the things and the people that you care about. You make the space for things that you care about. So if you're not willing to actively figure out a way to make the time, to make the space, to find the money, because y'all got it, that tells me that you don't care. Simple as that. So why should I try and fight with you when you're actively fighting against me? It just doesn't, the math don't math for me.
I think it's just like finding solutions instead of excuses. That's the best way I can put it. Because I have been in numerous meetings with administration where either they do these verbal gymnastics to get around your point, like a politician, or they just flat out say they can't do it. And I do want to give credit to you, Dean Basanani, for you haven't even been here a full year, but you've probably done more than any administrative person I've been in contact with. So props to you for that and giving us a stage to even just be ourselves, to quote unquote take a little bit of the mask off. May not be fully off, but we're getting to a space where we can at least be like honest with each other. And so again, just reiterating everything that Tiana said too, and everyone else about missing the mark. We cannot afford to miss any marks because every time we miss a mark, tomorrow we can take a step forward, next day miss a mark, and now we're 2 steps back. and it's going to be a constant struggle until the university just steps up to the ball and like really just hits change out of the park. Yeah.
So I have a question to which there may not be an answer, but it's something that has been really plaguing me. Jim brought up the event that took place last Thursday, and I don't know exactly how many people were there, but probably hundreds, if not thousands, as compared to today, and that's fine. But my real question is, how do we bring that group together with you and have an actual conversation? That would be the really difficult conversation. How do we do that in a constructive way? Is there a way to do that? And I'm asking everyone really that question. Yeah, Jim, if you could say that again, sorry.
So to have a conversation about a problem, both parties have to acknowledge the problem. The event's title and purpose was to not acknowledge, like to say that there is no issue. I mean, I have a 17-year-old son that's driving around Clemson. I'm not worried that his tags are expired. So I acknowledge that.
Are you now turning your son in? Is that what you're saying?
I'm
Yes,
turning
yeah.
in. But the point I'm making is if he's driving around, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
But my neighbor of color's son, he's worried about his son. So I can acknowledge that, so I can have a conversation. I'm not perfect, but I can at least start the conversation. But if you attended that event, what you're saying is that's not a problem. It's dismissing the problem. So how can you have a conversation? I mean, that's the problem. That's where we are. We're in the echo chamber.
Can I? So I wasn't at the event last Thursday, so I don't know exactly what was said. But I would argue that the fact that event took place is in a way an acknowledgement that there's a problem.
Correct.
No?
I would suggest otherwise. I would suggest that it's administration's way of saying that there's not a problem by allowing it to happen on our campus.
And it's not debate or free speech when it's hate speech. When the direct quote was, let's call Black Lives Matter what they are, a terrorist organization.
They're basically the KKK.
So
Okay.
maybe I've been buried under a rock, but I have no idea what you all are talking about.
One of our students wrote an editorial on it. Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. She wrote an editorial on it and explained all of the different points that Tommy Lauren has recently posted to her Instagram and her Twitter account. And it's about take off your mask. It's climate change. We're sitting here on a campus that's trying to go green, and she says she's a total denier of climate change. Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. She recently had some text about Asian lives after. I mean, it is the most repulsive. I am at such a lack of words for the fact that this happened at Little John, and our police department was making our students who pay for parking move their cars so people who were going to this event could park.
That's still ignoring Brandon.
Yeah.
One of the people who just recently came out and said that women who have actually been sexually assaulted would never say it.
You would never say it out loud. So all of that.
And the CU Me Too movement, you can imagine anger.
Yeah. So to your point, if the people aren't saying you don't matter, and that's clearly what Tommy Lauren is saying, and Tommy Lauren says in every single thing she posts. The climate doesn't matter. Anybody who stands in the face of and these masks, you're an idiot if you wear a mask. All of you are idiots. We're all idiots because we're buying into. That's what she says. So if we don't start there to have the conversation and we can move it toward that and get them to actually acknowledge that the people that they're speaking about are human beings.
That's the point. That's exactly.
Until they make that step, I don't see that there is like you. I don't think you can have a conversation. Like if somebody didn't see me as a human being, I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, like to your point, exactly that. It's the issue of trying to convince somebody that bleeds the same blood as me, who's gonna die the same, well, not same way, but die just as I am at some point, that I'm human as they are. And honestly, putting it back into the university perspective, it's actions like that that makes it impossible for us to even have those conversations, because college supposedly is the most liberal times of your year. I do not mean that in the sense of political ideology. I mean in the sense that you are supposed to be the most open. And so if we do not catch students at this point in time, then we are sitting them out into society that's going to teach them that everything they typically think is right. It's going to create more Tommy Laurens, more Tatums, whoever the hell he is. Excuse my French. But this is the point in which we have to stand up and actually cultivate just, trying to find the word, just healthy beliefs, things that are not toxic in the sense of invalidating somebody else's experience, saying that women's sexual assault, whatever you said, like stuff like that, we cannot, be saying. To wrap the point up, typically what I'm trying to say is like, it's at this point where if administration, if the universities all around the country don't do it, then they're just going to keep replicating this idea of society that is obviously not working.
And I was just going to say, going back to the whole Clemson family, and once again going back to administrator being in a way being the parents in a household cultivate the dynamic that is within that household. So if you're allowing these things to happen, you're not stopping them in their tracks, it's going to continue to happen whether you say you're against it or not. And as far as having some sort of a civilized conversation with people, so we're not preaching to the choir, I think it's hard to do that, as you just said, if somebody's not able to acknowledge the fact that your existence is being attacked, your existence is being seen as a threat on a consistent basis. I personally am to a point where, and I think, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name. I think you said it last week of racism being a white people problem. And I know I think you mentioned, LaToya, like not pointing fingers. But in my opinion, I completely agree. I don't think it should be our job as marginalized individuals to try and solve this. I also don't think that when marginalized groups come together to fight against something, that white, quote, allies should come in and try and colonize the thing.
Okay, I'll leave the stage right now.
I'm just saying that I think that when you're seeing these students of color organizing as a white person, if you care, if you claim to care, you should be being there in support, not taking over the thing. And I think that a lot of times these people that would not necessarily agree with the things that we're saying right now aren't going to agree with them until somebody that looks like them says it. And even then, the likelihood is slim, but the chance is much greater than me being a black young woman coming to a straight cis white man being like, you have a lot of privilege. He's gonna look in my face and be like, why should I care what's coming out of your mouth right now? So I think that's where the problem with having some form of a conversation comes in. It's hard to sit down and have a conversation when you've continuously been fighting. Generations before you have been fighting. I personally feel like generational trauma is very real. And I think that plays a very huge role in this. And it's hard to continue this fight civilly. I'll say that.
To your point, Tiana, I remember last summer when Trevor Lawrence got on stage at the Black Lives Matter march here in Clemson and got an outrage of claps and everything else. So it's like, that's in itself is crazy. Even at the protest last week, the voices you often heard on megaphones were that of white students, which I commend them for being there. But again, it's a recognition of the issue. And it's like the people who were raised in the South who don't necessarily understand, they've been misinformed. I think that was mentioned at the panel the other week. If again, if we don't catch them at this time where we can inform them of what it really is and how life truly is and how our experiences are all nuanced, then again, we will all be lost. So I think bridging that gap starts with information. It starts with resources. Everything that we mentioned on stage, it creates a safe space. So basically, if I was to go into the Tommy Lauren event right now, like back then, and speak all of this, they wouldn't listen. They'll be waiting to speak rather than listen to me. And I think it's creating a space where it's listening and not just talking.
And I would say to Tiana, I wouldn't necessarily expect them or require them to agree with you. I just would want them to listen to you first. Just getting the other side to listen. Maybe I'm kind of naive, but I think if hearing like actual people talking about their experiences does make an impact, unless you're completely impervious. And I think most people are not impervious. That's just my hope, at least.
I want to jump in about what you just said, kind of. So I'm in the performing arts building where you think, oh, we're so progressive, and, oh, right? I have been talking to colleagues for over 10 years about race, and they're now just getting it. So talking, which makes it, for me, very hard and exhausting. Also, too, I don't feel as though being part of the BIPOC faculty that I have to do all the weight, right? I'm on every committee known to man because I'm BIPOC, right? I spend more time with my BIPOC students because they need it, right? So it's extra time as well. And the whole thing, when you came to my office about Tommy Lauren, and I was like, I don't care, let them fix it. It's like, that's not our problem. That's their problem. They need to fix. I was not interested. I wasn't gonna give it energy. I was like, why can't they do something? As opposed to always putting on BIPOC people to do the protests, do all that. I wanted them to do the work and show that they're sincere and that it's a priority for them to do the work, because you had the power. Yes. Me being the one black person in my building does not have any power, but my colleagues do, the full professors do, right, who've been there forever, for decades, know why they can do it. So instead of me going, let's talk about it. Come on, let me convince you about my life and how hard it is. No, Kendra, no. And then they see an event, oh, my eyes are open, really? Because I've been saying it for so long. It's very frustrating. So I want my white colleagues to do the work. That will tell me that we're a family.
I think all of this is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, having a much larger center for all this. You know, if I'm going to be going home with a headache every single day trying to go through this, I'd rather be paid, honestly. So, you know, Clemson, if you're listening, I don't have a job lined up after graduation. My name is Kenneth Sloan. I'm a senior industrial engineering major. But yeah, in all seriousness, like, you know, it would be nice to, once again, to not have to do all this along with our other, you know, our actual jobs. You know, if there would be someone whose job it would be to talk, to reach out, to kind of compile from a space of, or from a position of knowledge. I think whether it's exactly correct or not, I think a lot of people are, you know, more convinced maybe by, you know, data points rather than people's stories. Not exactly maybe the right way to go about that. But if you were to come from a position where you have those data points ready, you know, you're knowledgeable about them because that's your job to know about them. You know, as a student, I'm learning, but, you know, I can barely keep my classwork crammed in my head, much less, you know, the entire history of racism in the U.S. So coming from that position, I think would be a lot more convincing to maybe to people who are not as open to listening to our stories instead.
And I think to one of the points that was being made earlier, when you have someone like Tommy Lauren coming in, it's really nice to think that this person is going to hear me, right? It's really, really nice. But then you add in this small thing called money, like Kenneth brought up, and you realize that she's not actually doing anything out of empathy or care. Like, this was a woman who was in Young Democrats in college, and then when she was paid better by Fox News, she transferred. And then she was like, you know what, I'm pro-abortion, and she lost a job but gained a couple female followers, so it was all cool. So like, this is not a conversation with her, it's like, where is the money? So the real conversation that would need to happen is with people who are actually making like politicking changes at our state level. Like, that's a better debate, a better conversation to have with like real people that are actually going to make changes. Because I don't personally like giving Tommy a platform or whatever her name is, because like, I don't really care. I actually care about the people who are legislating on behalf of like the Heritage Act, or like whether or not, you know, queer people are going to be able to use the bathrooms that they prefer. That's where I actually care. So I would think like having a conversation at a university, that's where a better debate and a better conversation would happen, along with the fact that like, if we're going to pretend to be a family, it would be super nice if Clemson would respond when there's violence on its own campus. Like, personally. So like, I also don't like using the term Clemson Family unless I'm saying it really angrily in a GSG email to all of my grad students. I prefer the term comrades, but that's a little communist for the South. So, you know, however everyone wants to go about it is totally cool. I also just think that there's a lot to learn. If we're going to say we're a family structure, there actually has to be love and not just money.
That's maybe the perfect word with which to end tonight, because I think it's 6:30. So, are there any further questions or comments before we wrap up? Or is love going to be our last word for tonight? Okay, very good. Okay, well, please join me in thanking the panelists. Thank you so much. And maybe we'll do this again next year. Would be nice. Okay, thank you so much. And congratulations to those of you who are graduating. I think Sarah's graduating and Kenneth is graduating. Very good.